Welcome, everybody, to our evening on discussing inflammation, the inflammation nation that we live in, the silent epidemic of the modern human race. It sounds dire, and I have to tell you, it is. We are going to go into the nitty-gritty here tonight, and I want to just share with you everything that I've been learning about inflammation and what we can do about it. So it's a broad topic, and I can tell you that it affects people from every strata. In fact, a couple years ago, I actually had a trip, and I kind of think of it as it was part of an experiment of observation of just looking at different cultures in a short amount of time. And I had my eyes open for recognizing signs of inflammation. And I actually traveled through Montreal over to Europe to London. I was actually in Paris. I was up in Scotland and even came back and went through New York. So I kind of had a little circle and I was observing the evidence of inflammation. And one of the places that it shows up is in the obesity, the levels of obesity. And I can tell you that there are definitely certain areas that had way more evidence of it than any. And I would say the least was in Paris, but I would say the most was in London, followed by Scotland. And clearly, this is not just within our country. When I talk about inflammation nation, it's affecting other nations as well. And this summer, I'm doing more of a staycation, staying at home, but plenty of evidence all around our country as well. So I want to dive in today because anyone who's suffering from any kind of chronic condition, they may very well have a baseline of chronic inflammation that is fueling it, that's not being addressed. And this is quite timely too, because when we think of just how our modern lifestyle has been engineered to really have the most inflammatory lifestyle possible if you just live by default. So if you're just in our culture, living our cultural norms, then you're in trouble. And so, easily over the last few decades, we really are seeing that the only thing that people seem to do as a cultural norm is just try to live around it or just accept it and live with it. When actually there's so much that can be done to even reverse chronic inflammation so that you don't have to suffer and struggle. And perhaps you yourself are on this workshop because you have concerns, or maybe you just simply know people that are struggling and you want to be able to help them and you want to prevent it in yourself because you look around you and you see, yeah, I see where the direction that most people are headed. If I'm not there yet, I don't want to go there. So I'm glad that you're here. If you're here, it tells me you're an action taker, whether you are watching it live with us or whether you are watching a recording. You want to know more so that you can do more for yourself and for your loved ones. And so thank you for being here and taking the time. So, based on my observations, I think that folks have made assumptions about inflammation and they're actually misunderstanding it, and therefore they're not managing it in the way that could actually turn it around. So, if you have ever experienced even something as simple as a sprained ankle, then you know about inflammation, at least of one sort. So when there's swelling in any kind of acute injury that has pain with it, yes, that is inflammation, but that is acute inflammation. That is directly from an injury to tissue, and that inflammation actually is good. It's actually the way that your body heals that injury. What we're talking about tonight is different, and it's still inflammation, but it's chronic low-grade inflammation, and it's silent. It doesn't have the pain and the swelling the way an acute injury does, that you know that you have it. And so that's why it is going unnoticed, is that it doesn't necessarily have a direct symptom associated with it that is forcing you to make a change. Instead, it is the baseline, the foundation of so many chronic conditions that just evolve without necessarily feeling discomfort. And so by the time we're actually in trouble with these chronic illnesses, then we're starting to play whack-a-mole, just trying to deal with the outcome of the chronic inflammation instead of going back upstream to actually address the inflammation itself and the source of it. So when you think of swelling of an ankle, that's with that acute inflammation where it's red and it's hot and it's swollen. But there's a different kind of swelling that can occur And that's with that chronic low-grade inflammation where it shows up with obesity. So there are, in the US, 60% of adults have one or more chronic inflammatory illnesses. And 8 out of 10 deaths are from inflammation or stress, all of which are preventable. So we don't need to be having people dying from these chronic illnesses. What is possible is that they could be just dying from natural, healthy old age. But instead, we're seeing people dying with chronic disease. The top 7 drivers of inflammation are a diet of inflammatory foods. So, who is putting it into our body? We're the ones that are doing it. Or if we're parents, we're feeding it to our kids. So, it's diet of inflammatory foods. The second one is chronic stress. And again, we've engineered our modern world so that we just ramp up that stress more and more. And every time we come up with something that's supposed to be more convenient and save us, time and energy and be more efficient for us and be more convenient, I have noticed that that is accompanied by more demand, more expectation, and more stress. So chronic stress is one of those factors. The third one is gut issues, leaky gut, dysbiosis, stealth infections like Lyme or Epstein-Barr, mono, that kind of thing. Another one, number 4, is environmental toxins, whether it's from air pollution, water pollution, or from toxins that we're exposed to, whether it's, from just pollutants that we're exposed to, or maybe it's toxins that are in the personal care products that we're using or in our food that we're taking in. Medications can be another source of an environmental toxin. Again, one that we're putting in, maybe we're trying to address one thing, but it's coming with a toxic side effect to it. And even vaccinations can be in that category of being an exposure to an environmental toxin. Another category, number 5, is poor sleep. Again, our modern world has engineered poor sleep right into it. Staying awake up too late at night, or having to get up too early in the morning after staying up too late, or just not getting good quality sleep because we don't have good sleep hygiene. We don't have a good sleep environment that we're in. The number 6 one out of these 7 is blood sugar imbalance. So again, that's part of unhealthy food intake. But what that does is it increases our cortisol levels. When our blood sugar goes up and down, our cortisol levels also can get jacked up. And cortisol is the hormone for stress. And then finally, number 7, one that often goes unnoticed, is chronic infections, teeth abscesses, root canals. Who would have thought that what happens in your mouth can affect your entire body? And so for some people, the source of their chronic inflammation is actually coming from some poor dental procedures that they've had done. So I just wanted to give you that as the top 7, but now we're going to just dive into really understanding, what does it actually mean when I say chronic low-grade inflammation? What exactly is that? And again, there's 2 types of inflammation: the acute kind that is actually painful, and then the insidious, painless, silent type. So chronic inflammation actually attacks tissues on a cellular level. When we think of injury to a tissue, like a swollen ankle from an ankle sprain, yes, that is affecting those cells and those tissues, but again, it's in an acute way, in a short-term way, and it's there to help your body. But when we talk about chronic inflammation at the cellular level, this is what's really driving this as something that is going across all the strata. So every gender, every age, we're seeing it. And so in every class of person, we're seeing it in. So first thing we have to ask is the body smart or stupid? Is the body smart or is it stupid? And if we think that it's stupid, then we think, well, we're going to have to just change things from the outside because the body doesn't know what it's doing. But if we recognize that the body is actually smart, and so there's really not any good or bad inflammation here. It's the body just doing what is appropriate for what's going on. So we were designed to survive and reproduce. And the cells are going to do whatever it takes to survive long enough to reproduce. That's just genetically how we're designed. We wouldn't be a species that would even exist if we didn't have that in our design. So no matter what environment we are subject to, our bodies, they will do everything that they can. So if you have acute inflammation, a sprained ankle swells, you get the chemicals that come in, you get the pain responses, all that is to heal you up. It's a response to injury. But most don't understand that inflammation at a cellular level, it's silent and chronic. So regardless of what you're struggling with, the vast majority are under attack at a cellular level. So let's unpack this here. What does it look like? It looks like heart disease, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, strokes, mood disorders, depression, anxiety, brain degeneration, Alzheimer's, senility, these neurodegenerative diseases, obesity, diabetes, cancer, joint pain, swelling, arthritis. And when I say joint pain, I mean joint pain that's coming up when you haven't injured it and it just hurts, right? That's chronic low-grade inflammation that's playing out here. And there could be swelling and redness around that too, but that's without the presence of an injury. We have all the atopic disorders, the allergies, the asthma, the eczema, the acne that can happen that people have in their skin and their lining of their lungs and those kinds of things. And then we also can have poor recovery from healing and poor immune response as well. So that's how it can show up. And so now let's just look at the details here of the cause. What is it that is causing all this? And if you're ready to take action, you need to know what the cause is so that you then know what your actual action steps are going to be. So if we look at what the cause is, and by the way, if you are struggling with any of these kinds of things and you want to know whether or not we can help, I would like to just invite you to please take us up on our offer. Please just text us with the words consult to our office number here, 802-985-9850. Just send us a text with consult. And what we'll do is we'll just set up a 10-minute conversation with me or with one of the doctors here in the clinic. And that way we can just talk it down. What's your unique situation? And we'll see whether it's something that we think we can help with. And there's no cost to that. We're happy to just have you reach out, let us know, and we're happy to help. So what is it that's causing silent inflammation? Well, here we can see, we're going to just move through it here. When we look at this balance of omega-6s and omega-3s, so what I'm talking about here is when we talk about the diet being the #1 cause of chronic low-grade inflammation, what we mean is anyone that comes to this workshop, they're looking for what are things that I can do, how can I identify the causes. And so when I've done other workshops, for example, the one that was called how to get 15 pounds healthier in 15 weeks, we talked a lot about the fact that obesity, for example, it's actually a hormonal problem. And so we know that it's the chemistry in the body that's happening. And with that one, it was insulin that was driving the body towards obesity and the blood sugar concerns and so on. And then again, that sets people up for heart disease and cancer and so on. Well, tonight we're going to look at a specific ratio of EFAs, essential fatty acids. So when we say EFA, essential fatty acid, we mean when it says essential, it means it's required by the body. The body cannot make it itself, so it has to get it in through the diet. So when we see these different omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids, the omega-6 fatty acids, there's no such thing as a bad fat, but there are fats that are good fats. So the omega-6s are good fats. We need some of those. And unless they're an unhealthy version that's denatured from processing and is toxic already, otherwise, though, healthy omega-6s, are good fats. But I want you to think of omega-3s as great fats. Those are great fats because the balance is the key here. And we want to see, genetically speaking, the way that our bodies evolved over time, having a 1-to-1 ratio or even a 2-to-1 is what our ancestors from 40,000 years ago to 20,000 years ago, this is what had shaped our genetics, and it shaped our digestion and all of our cells functions. It was all based on this ratio of having 2-to-1, 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. So that was ideal. And in the modern world, we actually, again, have engineered it so we're getting a massive increase in the omega-6 fatty acids, and we're getting a drop off of the omega-3s. So in the last 200 years, but especially the last 50 years, we've had a shift, and the body is moving more and more towards a pro-inflammatory state. And so if we take even if you think of the denatured omega-6 fatty acids that are coming in that are really bad, they are, it's from processing and cooking with these unsaturated oils. They oxidize, they get damaged, and then they are inert. So they're non-functional. But being non-functional doesn't mean they're not existing. Oh, yes, they are in your body and they are taking the place of what should be a functional one, but instead it's taking up the place and it's dysfunctional. It's not functioning, it's inert. And so it fills in the membranes and it takes the place of what should be a healthy one. One sign of that is age spots. Age spots are one of the signs of that, and that's an accumulation over a long period of time. So when we're using up antioxidants and we're overdoing it, that's what happens. When we think of the undenatured omega-6s, these ones we do need, and they can be oxidized cholesterol, it's esterified, and it's what transports the omega oils. So they're bad already from eating them, so cholesterol is not the problem. The problem is it's just the cholesterol is just the transporter of them. And so if we lower the cholesterol, okay, we can't transport them, but we can't transport them if they're good or bad. We can't transport them. So it needs to be organically grown and processed, and it needs to be organically expeller pressed is going to be the best form. Most of the oils have been hybridized, so they are higher in omega-9s, which is a non-essential omega fatty acid. Now, linoleic acid is the omega-6. We only need a little, but we're getting way too much. And so we have to start avoiding these. And so when we talk about avoiding them, the things are soybean oil, corn oil, safflower, sunflower oils, cottonseed oils, and canola oil. And so if we see right here, this is a great chart. This is from drkate.com. It's Dr. Kate Shanahan. I just loved this website that she has. And so we can see that there are the good fats, which are the traditionally used fats and oils. They're not highly processed and they're not refined. And so the ones we can use for all purposes would be things like olive oil, avocado oil, peanut oil, butter and ghee, tallow and lard. Tallow is beef fat, lard is pork fat, cocoa butter, macadamia nut oil, coconut oil, almond oil, unrefined palm oil, and palm kernel oil. Those are the ones that are good. The other ones that are good, but you just want to be cautious with heat with them, would be walnut oil, flax oil, sesame oil, sesames themselves, walnuts themselves, seeds, and the natural fats and oils that are in the seeds, fatty fish, and even artisanal grapeseed oil. It's again, caution with heat. The ones that are okay, but they're not great, would be if it's refined peanut oil, refined avocado oil, and refined coconut oil. So you can let some of those in, but just in a limited way. The bad ones, the ones you just want to avoid, are the ones that are polyunsaturated. They're refined, bleached, and deodorized, or even the worst ones are the trans fats, the ones that are labeled hydrogenated. So we want to avoid the soy oil, soybean oil, the sunflower oil, safflower oil, canola oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, hydrogenated oil, refined palm oils. And this is actually what mostly you are going to see in restaurants. They also will use grapeseed oil and rice bran oil as well. But again, restaurants, we cannot assume that they're using any of the good ones. And if they are, they're going to be bragging about it. Now, I was delighted to hear that my daughter's school, she goes to Hillsdale College, and they just this year, they changed their cooking oil from the traditional polyunsaturated oils, the vegetable oils, they changed it to tallow. So they are now cooking with beef fat, and it's the healthiest fat around. Now, if we look at the trans fats, the hydrogenated fats, that's that fake whipped cream, the fake butter spreads, the store-bought pastries. If you think of Crisco. Crisco was like the first time that showed up in our population. And, my grandmother, she used to use butter for a lot of her amazing baking that she did, but then she switched to Crisco because she was programmed by our culture that that's a healthier way to go. And so she changed to Crisco. I grew up with Crisco because that was what our parents were told was going to be the healthiest thing for us. So that is a trans fat. And then we have the chicken nuggets, the margarine, the shortening, restaurant fried foods, most chips and crackers, most protein bars, most salad dressings, most mayo brands, most granola and cereal. They at least have the polyunsaturated, if not having some of those really bad ones, the trans fats. So you do have to look closely. And if you do see any of these on the label, please start looking at the labels. You will be shocked at what you find, like things like you never would think, why would this happen? Why would they even put it in there? Yep, they're putting it in there. We had a discussion just today in our office here. One of our team members had made their own homemade hummus, which hummus is a big seller now. It's almost as big as Doritos these days. But you can have a healthy version of hummus. And he made it in the traditional style, and it was good. And when you look at the store-bought, a lot of them have canola oil in them. Like, why did they have to put that in? It's not even the traditional way to make it. So there's reasons why people that are in business are selling these things, but please look at the ingredients so that you can actually take control and make sure that what you're putting in is going to be healthy. All right. So when we look at the impact of omega-3 and omega-6s, I do want to geek out here with you. I actually do want you to understand what's happening at the cellular level. So when we think of our body, we think, okay, we're made of organs and tissues, and all those tissues are made of cells. And our cells are made of fat, and specifically the membrane of the cell is made of fat. It's a phospholipid layer. And so when we look at the cell membrane, if you can see it in this picture, we have this two layers. We have a layer at the top that has the phosphate on the outside and then the lipid layer. And then the second layer down here is, oh, it's another lipid layer and then another phosphate layer on the other side. And then we have these channels that move things in and out of the cell through the membrane. And these are proteins that allow that. So these are proteins make up receptor sites. So, but you can see this entire cell membrane is made of lipids, and lipids is another word for fat. We have this phospholipid bilayer. It's made of fat. So our cells are made of fat. And this has the gates and the doorways and the windows, which are the made of proteins, which are the receptor sites. So when you think of a cell, many people think of it kind of like, well, it's a round ball. But rather than thinking of it that way, I want you to think about it this way. Remember these toys? Maybe you even played with one when you were a kid. Maybe your kids are playing with them right now. These are the toys that have these shapes to them on their edges. And if you could imagine that each one of these shapes is a receptor site, it's a certain shape. And if you use the wrong puzzle piece, it won't fit in there. So the cell membrane is filled with these receptor sites that allow messages to go in and out. And the messages are triggered by when a certain chemical arrives at the membrane of the cell, it needs to fit into the right receptor site in order for its message to be received. So we actually are a large cluster of cells, but they're complicated. They're not just spheres, right? They are something that has intelligence to it, that has organization to it. And health, if we go by a simple definition, it's optimal cell function. But what does that mean, optimal cell function? It means that it's letting things in and out properly. And so the shape and function of the cell receptors are dependent on the essential fatty acids that make up the cell membrane. So we talked about omega-6s and omega-3s. Omega-3s are liquid at room temperature. So if you get a bottle of cooking oil, the omega-3s will be liquid at room temperature. The omega-6s actually are solid, but when you manipulate them, like you take these seed oils and manipulate them, you now are forcing them to be liquid. but it's because of the processing of it. So if you think of butter that melts down into a liquid, like that has omega-3s in it, for example. Omega-6s are solids. So omega-6 is part of the cell membrane on purpose. It needs to be in there because it makes things rigid. It adds structure. But the fluidity in the membrane is what allows the receptors to morph and change as they need to. So I know in this toy, it looks like it's just a rigid shape and it just stays that shape. But on the cell membrane, a living cell, the receptor sites can morph and change so they can let certain things in and out as needed. And so we want to have that adaptability. We want that adaptability to be present. So we need to have fluidity in that cell membrane along with the structure. The fluid is what makes the receptive sites easier and more readily available to adapt and let things in and out as needed. Okay, so I hope you appreciate how we're getting complex here. So we started out just looking at it simply. You are cells, and all your tissues are cells, and your cells are made of fat, but they have these protein doors and windows, which are the receptors, which are like locks and keys. And the omega-6s are providing the structure, and the omega-3s are promoting cell membrane fluidity. Okay, so that fluidity is so, so key because a second job of omegas is to address inflammation. So the first job is to have the cell membrane be fluid so that communication can happen in the cell. Receptors can be prepared and ready to receive a message and also to send messages out that are then picked up and brought to other cells. Now, the second job of the omegas is to address inflammation. So when we look at this idea of inflammation, that ratio again is important. We need to have a balanced ratio. And we have these EPAs and these AAs that are competing. So the arachidonic acid and it's a long one, and I'm going to have you see how it's spelled so you can memorize it yourself, but otherwise you can just call it an EPA. And that is related to prostaglandins that have to do with inflammation and silent inflammation. And how do we measure it? So we can do blood testing. So when we did this in person, I would bring out my whiteboard and I would sketch it all out for you. But for the sake of the webinar, it's actually easier if we just use this chart. So we'll just don't let your eyes glaze over right now because we're looking at some detail. I'm going to walk you through this step by step. And at the end, I'm going to just summarize what's the most important thing to learn here. So just kind of come with me for a ride here. So when we look at the omega-6s here, the omega-6s are the linoleic acid. Otherwise, it's abbreviated as LA, linoleic acid. And it's going to come from the polyunsaturated oils, including flax and corn and safflower oil, or some of the other, some of the ones that will be the sources of that. The first step that happens is it changes to a delta-6 desaturase. And that delta-6 desaturase, there are these delta-6 enzymes. They get impaired by aging, alcohol, and nutrient deficiencies, by trans fatty acids, and by elevated cholesterol. And they will react to these gamma-linolenic acid, the GLA. Now, GLA is also found automatically in black currant seed oil, in evening primrose oil, and in borage oil. So these omega-6s, they have to be translated, they have to be changed in order to be transferred into a GLA. So there's work that has to be done here. And what's needed to do that work now can get impaired. But we can go straight to the black currant, the EPO, the borage. We could get it directly from that. And we do need to have 18 to 24% of our fatty acid intake to be this GLA. So that's why, certain parts of that cell membrane need to have some structure to it. Now from here, everything that makes it this far along, whether it's from the original linoleic acid and then it becomes the gamma-linolenic acid, that then turns into the DGLA, the dihomogamma-linolenic acid. And this one actually can convert into a PGE1, which is a prostaglandin that is anti-inflammatory. So it does have that capability of producing some anti-inflammatory component to it. But the rest of it continues in this direction with the delta 5 desaturase, which then makes it into arachidonic acid, AA. And the arachidonic acid is going to then move into either lipoxygenase or you may have heard of COX-2. That's the cytooxygenase. And you may have heard of this associated with people that have cardiovascular trouble. And they take a drug that is a COX-2 inhibitor that is trying to decrease inflammation. But so the COX-2 actually is pro-inflammatory, whether it's the LBT4 pro-inflammatory, the lipoxygenase, or if it's the COX-2s that are pro. Both of these, arachidonic acid moves into these both, and they both are pro-inflammatory. They increase inflammation. So we really don't want a lot of this around. Okay. When we look at the omega-3 line, we start, and this is called alpha-linolenic acid, so different from gamma-linolenic acid. Alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, is found in black currants. Oh, so it's also black currants. It has both the GLA and the ALA. And flaxseed also has a lot of this too. So some people think, oh, well, if this is omega-3s, this is good, and I'm vegetarian, I can get my omega-3s from flax and black currant. Well, it turns out that it has a lot of steps that it needs to go through in order to get to the place where it actually is anti-inflammatory. And so the first step is that same delta 6 desaturase. Both of them have to go through that. Then there's this stearidonic acid phase it needs to go to. And then that transforms into the icosapentaenoic acid, ETA. We'll just say ETA. And then that has that delta 5 desaturase. Again, it's present in both of these sequences. And finally, it gets to the EPA and the DHA. This is the useful form that is going to be anti-inflammatory, the LBT5 and the PGE3. So this is a lipoxygenase that is anti-inflammatory, and this is a cytooxygenase that is anti-inflammatory. You can see that they look very similar, but they're doing different things. Now, I just want you to notice that this fish oil and cod liver oil, it is already coming in the form that is exactly what we need to use to fight inflammation in the body. If you start from up here with the omega-3s as far as black currants and flax oil, if you start from here, you have to go through all these steps in order to get to this level, to get to the EPA and the DHA. And there actually are people that are unable to make that transition. They just don't have it genetically in their body. It's not working. And it turns out that many people that easily go towards obesity, they are the ones oftentimes that don't have this ability. And so many people that are vegetarian that become obese, even as being vegetarian, that's one of the reasons is they don't actually have the capacity to be able to transform these into the usable way, the usable forms. Now, I want you to notice one other big arrow here. Once you have the EPA and the DHA, it literally can not only be anti-inflammatory in its actions, but it can come in and it can block the arachidonic acid from ever going towards pro-inflammation. So it's working both in a good way that is active and in a good way that is inactivating some things that we don't want to be active. Okay, so I know it's kind of complex, but what I want you to get from this is we need some omega-6s because they can actually work towards this PGE1 series, the prostaglandin anti-inflammatory. And we do need to have some structure in our cell membranes. But for the most part, we want to have a lot more of the omega-3s because our culture is pushing inflammation, it's pushing stress, and it's pushing our bodies to need to have more balance between the omega-3 and the omega-6s because we tend to be flooded with the omega-6s. Okay, I hope that I was able to make something that is complex, simple to understand here. EPA appropriately blocks the omega-6 delta 5 desaturase downstream from converting. So that's what it does, is it blocks it for right there. That's how that works. Okay, so that as a baseline of understanding. Now, I want you to know one other piece here. When we talk about pro-inflammation and anti-inflammation, when you do have an acute injury, remember that ankle swelling, when you have an acute injury, there is inflammation that is important to happen. And what's important about it is we need it to resolve. We need substances that are going to help to resolve the inflammation. So we need the inflammation to show up in order to get all of the white blood cells there to eat up that dead tissue. We need the blood flow there again to just deliver all those white blood cells to take care of the damaged tissue and to promote the healing tissue and the regenerating tissue. And so we need some inflammation, but then we need that inflammation to resolve. And so when we look here, we see that we need some of the precursors are the arachidonic acid that will create the lipoxins. But now we have which are toxins to the fat, lipoxin. But then we have the EPA, which is a resolvin. And then we have the DHA, which is a resolvin. So these are what help to resolve the inflammation that occurs. And we even have these protectins that are coming from them as well that are neuroprotective. So there's very specific actions that we want to have happen in order to address acute inflammation. We want it to resolve. And then if we're stuck in chronic inflammation, we want to stop feeding it, stop pouring kerosene on the fire, and then we also want to be able to finally start to resolve it. Now, when we look at unwanted fat and obesity, it's a hormonal storm that's happening. And in the workshop that I do called How to Get 15 Pounds Healthier in 15 Weeks, we talk about how it's all based on this hormonal storm. And we talk about the cortisol and the insulin balance. And when we look at what's happening, it's the hormonal storm, but it's also very pro-inflammatory, and it's also related to chronic disease. So there's this metabolic derangement and this hormonal storm, and that cortisol is the fat storage hormone, which also is related to increased stress, which also increases the prostaglandin 2, which is that inflammation we want to drop down. When we and there's something I'm going to add in at the end. I'm going to show you a study that shows that when there's a nerve interference at the very top of your neck, when there's a subluxation or a misalignment of the vertebrae at the top of the neck, it affects the vagus nerve, which then affects our acetylcholine production. And that actually can interfere with proper dealing with inflammation in a proper way. So all in all, it's not just about, when we talk about obesity, it's not just about wanting to look good. We actually want you to function better and feel great. And again, as I said before, 50% of people that cannot convert that EPA to DHA, which is then what we use for the resolvins to stop the inflammatory process, but it's also to get that balance that we need in our blood and in our tissues and in the cell membranes. So how does it show up? It shows up in our cardiovascular health. So when we think of this word cardiovascular, cardio refers to the heart. Vascular is referring to all the tubes in the body that are carrying the blood back and forth, whether it's the arteries or the veins or the capillaries. That's the vascular system. And so when we talk about cardiovascular, we mean the part about the heart that sets that rhythm to the blood flowing through the body, and then that blood flow itself through the tubes. So heart health is part of cardiovascular health, but blood vessel health is the other part of it. So when we look at the blood vessels, oftentimes there's this alarm and concern about high cholesterol, high blood pressure, plaques, clots, and strokes. That's kind of the simplest way of thinking about cardiovascular disease and concerns of cardiovascular health. And what that all comes down to is something called the lumen. So the lumen is the lining of the blood vessels. It's the lining. So we have this outer wall, which is a muscular wall, And then we have the lumen, which is the lining of it. And then you have all the blood flowing inside the lumen. If we do something that is inflammatory, in other words, if we're eating inflammatory foods, that kind of thing, the inflammatory ingredients can actually irritate and then nick up and scratch the lumen of the blood vessel walls. And when that happens, the blood that's flowing through comes in contact with the muscles of the blood vessel wall. And our body says, whoa, if blood is actually coming in contact with the muscle, that is not good. That means there's damage there. And so the first thing the body wants to do is create a scab on that nick of the blood vessel wall. Now, if you were to, skin your knee or cut your finger and you get a scab there, the scab is not the problem. The problem is that you injured yourself, that you cut yourself. But when we're looking at cardiovascular health, cholesterol is what the scabs are made of that are there to try and heal those nicks in the blood vessel walls. And so that cholesterol has been demonized because it's showing up. And now people are worried that it's going to create a blood clot. But the problem is not the cholesterol. The problem is the fact that we have injured the blood vessel walls. And that's through an inflammatory lifestyle. That's through inflammatory foods and so on that are damaging the blood vessel walls. And now we need to try and repair them. And we use the cholesterol to repair them. So I hope that makes it a little bit more straightforward that the problem is not the cholesterol. The problem is not even the high blood pressure. When high blood pressure can add too much stress to the blood vessel walls, the problem is what's causing the high blood pressure. And I promise you, it's not a deficiency of a blood pressure medication. That's not the cause of it. People are using blood pressure medications to treat it, but that's not addressing the cause. That's just changing the mechanics of what's happening using a drug that actually has side effects as well. So I hope that helps you have a better understanding. Now, where else does chronic disease patterns show up? Cardiovascular system is one of them. Joint health is another. And so when people have, anybody here that's on the call struggling with some joint pain, either now and then or on an ongoing basis, there are kind of two ends of the spectrum on this one. So there are people that have like shoulder, elbow, knee, hip problems, and they even have this special superpower where they can predict the weather because their joints start to ache before the weather changes, but they know it's going to change because they're feeling that joint pain. So a little superpower that they have that it's affected by weather systems. And so we have people coming in that have kind of like the aches and pains in the joints, but we also have people coming in that have the arthritis, the degenerative joint disease, osteoarthritis, or what we call lovingly adult FAS syndrome, adult falling apart syndrome. So maybe you're suffering from that yourself, but at any rate, it is rampant and the baby boomers got it all, but we're seeing it even in younger and younger populations. So if anyone tells you that degenerative joint disease is a natural part of aging, it is not. If they tell you that, I want you to just kick them in the shins because they are leading you astray. Many people, when they say, oh, it's just arthritis, and they say it with that exact lilt in their voice, just arthritis, and it's a defeated tone, like there's nothing I can do about it. It's just arthritis. And I say, kick them in the shins when they say that, because if you think there's nothing you can do about it, you're wrong. There's actually a lot you can do. There's definitely a lot you can do to prevent it. It's not just a natural part of aging. And there's actually things that you can do to reconcile it if you do already have it. So when we look at x-rays, we oftentimes will see bone spurs on kind of C5 and C6 in the neck. And we look at the amount of the bone spurring, and it tells us how long that person has actually had that degenerative change, how long they've had the problem in there. It's almost like the aging, but it's not because they're just aging naturally. It's just because they've had the disturbance for a long time. So, if your right knee is the knee that is bothering you and not the left knee, well, it's not aging because both your knees are the same age. not unless you've been hopping around on one leg for half of your life, right? They're both taking the same wear and tear. So really just recognize it's not just from aging. There's more to it. It's really the result of chronic poor biomechanics and biochemistry. So really what we're talking about tonight as far as joint health goes is the biochemistry part of it. But certainly you do want to have somebody looking at the alignment of your spine, of your joints, so that you also have good biomechanics, because that can promote wear and tear that leads to degenerative change. And athletes, all performance comes from the brain synapses, the reaction time, your agility, your contraction, your strength, your recovery time. But essential fatty acids are actually key for all of that as well, because they're important for brain health and nervous system function. Now, talking about brain health, we're going to get into that now, because every brain synapse actually requires to have the proper balance of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. All pediatric development is requiring that as well. All breastfeeding, we want it to be coming in properly through the breastfeeding. So we want to make sure that children are getting breastfed and that the mothers are healthy in what they're eating so they can provide exactly what's needed to the babies. Brain health, it's affect the EPA, EHA, the omega-3, omega-6 balances affects our mood, it affects depression, anxiety, it affects senility, and even Alzheimer's. So DHA and EPA are essential for all of these brain functions. And if you've heard of pregnant mothers giving birth, and now, at the last third trimester, they're getting baby brain because their baby is actually they're growing 250,000 brain cells every minute in the third trimester. So they are just leaching out of the mother's brain everything that they need, unless the mother is actually saturating her system with all the good things that baby needs. And so if she's deficient, it's going to be a problem. Or when breastfeeding, if she's deficient, the baby's still going to be trying to suck it right out of her, literally, and getting it right into that breast milk because the baby needs it as it's developing. So there is an art to introducing new information and integrating things. And so we need to have good brain health in order to do all that. But I'm trying to make it as easy and straightforward as I can for you and have you recognize how important it really is. So if you, again, have been struggling with any of these things, please feel free to reach out to us and we'd love to have a consult with you. Now, what do symptoms really say about your health? So by the time you are feeling the symptoms, what this chart tells us is you're already moving in a certain direction. So the symptoms tell us in what direction you're heading. Let me explain this chart to you. When we look at this chart, we can see that, here, I'm just going to make it a little bigger. There we go. We can see that it's a continuum. And at one level, we have high level wellness. And at the other end of it, we have premature death, early death. Now, in the middle is what we would call the neutral point. So to the left of the neutral point is where we start to have signs that we're losing function. Then the symptoms start to show up and we're feeling it. And then if you can't get a handle on those symptoms anymore, now it's a disability. And you can see that functional level is just taking you towards that early death. Versus if we have awareness about the right things to do for our health and we educate ourselves about what we have to do, because our modern world does not make it just simple and natural to just live by default the way our ancestors would have. They would have been living a healthy lifestyle just by default. But no, we have to educate ourselves. And it's a struggle sometimes. We have to grow into it in order to achieve high level wellness. So you see, it is a continuum. We have the sick side and then we have the healthy side. But in the middle is the not sick zone, where you're not necessarily healthy, but you're not necessarily having signs and symptoms of being sick. And so you'll notice that the signs show up before the symptoms. And yet the symptoms are something that we feel, but the signs are something we can measure. So we literally can measure evidence that we're losing function. And in this realm of chronic disease and chronic low-grade inflammation, we actually have ways of measuring if you're moving in that direction long before you have any of the symptoms of that chronic disease. We can measure it. And I'm going to show you some of the simplest ways to do that. So I wanted you to kind of have an idea here that By the time you're feeling the symptoms are telling you which direction you're heading. You're heading towards lower and lower function. And so so we want to pay attention to symptoms when they do show up, but we don't want to just mask those symptoms. We don't want to just take medications to alter it. We actually don't even just want to take medications to try and change the signs. We want to change the lifestyle habits that have been pushing us in that direction. And that's where we're truly going to lead to higher and higher levels of health. It was Dr. Marcia Angel. She's an MD that was the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine for about 20 years. Imagine the research that she saw go in front of her. And she said, you can never behave your way, you can never medicate your way out of a situation that you've behaved your way into. You're just going to feel better as you're actually getting worse. I love that quote because there's so much truth in it. Okay, so we want to just talk about how there are some dangerous beliefs out there that are getting people into trouble. And here's the first one. Drugs work. Now, this is a dangerous belief because what do you think? Well, it depends. It depends on how you're thinking about this. If you're thinking about, well, I'm taking an anti-inflammatory medication that's going to stop the inflammation by interfering with the inflammatory process, like I'm taking a COX-2 inhibitor to try and interfere with that inflammation. But the question is that interference also causing a problem at the same time? And it really depends on what your objective is. So you can see you could take a medication that's going to come with a side effect that over time it's going to affect your liver or it's going to affect your kidneys. And you could have deterioration happening there. Or if your goal is, I want to be healthier, then the drug may not be the best way to get there. So sometimes people, even with an acute sprained ankle, they'll go and they'll take an aspirin or a Tylenol or an NSAID trying to take the inflammation down. But what we find is that actually is interfering with those resolvins that are actually designed to resolve that inflammation. And that can actually lead to more chronic inflammation of something that started out acute and should have just healed and didn't. And so the most common anti-inflammatories that we know of are the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, also known as NSAIDs. And a lot of people think, oh, these are over the counter, so they must be safe. And there are people that are popping these like candy. And what they don't know is actually there are a lot of side effects that can come from taking NSAIDs. In fact, 16,000 people a year are dying just from taking these non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And there's more to it than you would think. So these are some of the side effects. And I believe it was the New England Journal of Medicine actually came out with a lifetime limit on how many NSAID pills your body can actually tolerate before it starts to get into trouble. So one of the things that it causes is stomach bleeds. Another thing, it can actually lead to heart attacks and stroke and AFib. Oh my goodness, there are so many people nowadays with AFib. I don't know if you're noticing that, but I remember years ago, I didn't know anybody that had AFib. And then you start to see in the airports these AFib defibrillators, right? And now, people right in your family, we're just hearing about people that are struggling with AFib. It's more and more and more. It's increasing. And there are a lot of people that are using aspirin as a way to be proactive, try to prevent cardiovascular disease, but it turns out that may not be the best strategy because actually it could be related to increases in heart attack and stroke and AFib. It even is related to flesh-eating bacteria, toxic shock syndrome, osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis, there are people that are taking the Motrin or the Advil or the ibuprofen for their arthritis. And yet, one of the side effects is it can cause osteoarthritis. It's also related to increases in infertility and miscarriage. Well, what wannabe parents would not want to know that? And then it can actually be associated with hearing loss, with allergic reactions, again, liver and kidney failure, and even breast cancer. too much NSAID use can lead to that. And so what they found is if you take more than 1,000 to 1,500 in a lifetime, it can increase your rate of kidney failure by 4 times. And if you have 5,000 in a lifetime, it increases it by like 800%. So it's a real thing to consider if you've been thinking that you could just get away with managing things with the NSAIDs. It's not a good way. Who here needs a better way than that, right? We all do. And yet I hear people that say, well, I take the aspirin for the headache that was caused by the Zyrtec that I take for the hay fever. Well, I got that hay fever from the Relenza, which is I'm taking for that uneasy stomach that I got from the Ritalin that I take for the short attention span that I have that was caused by the Scopoderm teas that I take for the motion sickness that I got from the Lomatil that I take for the diarrhea that was caused by the Xenical for the uncontrolled weight gain that I had from the Paxil that I take for the anxiety that I got from the Zocor that I was taking because I had that high cholesterol. Because really, exercise, a good diet, regular chiropractic care, it's really just too much trouble. So I'm just going to go with the drug route, right? Is that smart or stupid, right? Just stop the madness here. Let's all get on track with what's actually going to work. So again, when we get back to the balance, the ideal balance here is going to be the omega-6s to the omega-3s. We want it to be between a 1-to-1, no more than a 4-to-1 ratio. And yet in the modern diet style, it's 10-to-1 or even as much as 30-to-1. And so we've had a major increase in omega-6 and a major decrease in the omega-3s. So how do we know if we have this unbalance? Do we wait for our cholesterol to go up and then get on a statin? Is that what we're going to be measuring as cholesterol levels? Or is there something that we can measure sooner than that to see the signs sooner so we can take action sooner? And so if we were able to measure the arachidonic acid and the EPA balance, that would give us notice much sooner than waiting for cholesterol levels to go up and having blood clots and so on. So there is a very simple blood spot test that you can take, and we actually carry this test right here in the office. It's called the Omega-3 Index Plus, and it actually literally is going to give you a report that's going to tell you whether or not you have that cellular inflammation and whether you have that imbalance in your omega-6, omega-3 ratio. So if you're interested in that, please contact the office and let us know, and we're happy to provide that to you. It's very simple. You just do a little pinprick, capture a spot of blood, and then we send that in and get it tested, and then we get the results. And then what's really neat is this is measuring the last 3 months of your lifestyle. So then if you change your lifestyle, once you get the results back, then we go and in 3 months we test again and we see if what you're doing is successful. And it's so exciting when you can see those numbers changing. Of course, if you don't change your lifestyle and then we don't see the change, then we need to get back on track. But of course, if you change your lifestyle already, it'd be nice to check in and see, is what you're doing successful? So it's a great test to use for that. So do you need an oil change, right? What are you doing with the oils that you're eating, and is it causing problems? Americans, again, they consume too much omega-6s. Remember, the typical diet has too much of the omega-6s, which is bad, and that is inflammatory. To have that kind of a ratio, whereas again, the good ones is the ideal diet, and we're having that equal amounts of omega-3s and omega-6s, so a 50% instead of that 10% omega-3 and 90% omega-6. So one way of doing it is anti-inflammatory and the other way is inflammatory, and those are associated with more pain if you're out of balance and less pain if you're in balance. So it's very straightforward, but again, the pain is kind of the last thing that starts to show up. So you can get this tested way before any pain starts to show up as well, to be proactive. All right, and so now let's look at, again, how do we achieve this? The bad omega-6 fatty acids are, they are essential fatty acids. So when we say bad, as I said in the beginning, there's no good or bad. So The good omega-6s, but then they're the great omega-3s, okay? Remember that. So both are essential fatty acids. The omega-6s are going to come in the form of the grains, like the corn and so on. The grain-fed animals, now they're going to be inflammatory because they should be eating their natural diet, which would be grasses, but instead they're being fed grains. And that makes them fatter, which makes them more sellable, more delicious to some people. So the grain-fed animal proteins will be inflammatory. So if you eat the conventional meats, then those will be more high in omega-6s and they will be more inflammatory. The vegetable oils, the corn oil, cottonseed oil, sunflower, safflower, peanut oil, soybean oil, and canola oil. The omega-3 fatty acids, the sources are, again, it's essential. The cold water fatty fish. Remember, you need to eat the skin. That's where the most of that fat is. The grass-fed meats, the game and the range-fed eggs, the flax, the hemp, and the walnuts, and the fish oil supplements. All of those are the key things here. Now, remember another dangerous belief? Some people are actually told, well, there's nothing you can do about that. All you can do is just be on this medication. That's all there is, nothing else that you can do about it. But that's not true. So what can you do to fix it? You can make changes. And we say you can make diet style changes, meaning you want to reduce the fast white carbs, like the breads and the grains and the cereals and the sugar. So reduce the white carbs. And, vegetables are carbs as well, but we want to increase the colorful fruits and vegetables. We want to reduce the bad omega-6 vegetable oil intake. And we want to add in the grass-fed meats, the wild fish and game, the range-fed eggs, increasing colorful fruits and vegetables because they have those polyphenols, which are the antioxidants, and those are anti-inflammatory. And we also could use supplementation as another tool, as a bridge that we can use if we are not there yet and if we're struggling with the chronic inflammation. So I want to just show you that there is an anti-inflammatory diet, and then I'm going to show you, we're going to talk about unpack this supplementation topic. But remember that the more that your diet is healthy, the less you're going to need to take supplements. And so we do have this 2-page, both sides, anti-inflammation guidelines handout. And if you're in my practice, you'll be familiar with it. If you need another copy, just ask us next time you come in. If you're not in our practice and you'd like to see this simple, it's a 2-page, it's a single page, both sides, but it really just goes into all the basics that you need to know for an anti-inflammatory diet. And so if you would like to receive one of these, just send us a text that says AI diet, and we'll get it right out to you. So again, let's talk about the supplementation. And fish oil is going to be one of the best supplements that you can use for this. We oftentimes talk about what are the ways to reconcile this modern unhealthy lifestyle that we've created. And supplementation is a very easy modern way to create the bridge to help to reconcile the terrible things that we've done in our lifestyle. It's an easy way for us to get our way there. So when we talk about picking the right fish oil, what are the things that you need to know? First off, you want to just have a visual test. And that visual test can be simply look at the expiration date, right? But visually, we want to see, if we look at the little gel caps, it should be clear. If it's cloudy, then that's a sign that fish oil is too old and it's gone rancid, or it just wasn't processed and packaged properly and it's gone rancid. So that's the visual taste, just looking at it. Then we have the bite test, where we're going to smell it and taste it. And yes, it might have a fish taste to it, but it shouldn't have a rancid taste or smell to it. And everybody knows rancid when they smell it because it's just bad. You know what rancid milk tastes like or smells like, and we just know it. So if you bite it and it smells bad, then that's not a good one. That's gone bad. That's rancid. It hasn't been processed properly. But if it just has a fishy taste to it, that's different. Now, also look at the ingredients and see, how is it stabilized? Is it stabilized in a healthy way with antioxidants, such as vitamin E tocopherols, rosemary, lemon oil, or even something called astaxanthin, which is comes from another type of fish and marine animal. And again, as I said, just check the expiration date. And sometimes it may not have expired yet, but you look and it's cloudy and it's just a cheap supplement that's not a good one. And so don't go there. So use all of your senses to be able to really confirm that it's the right one. Now, how do you know which type of fish oil to use for yourself? Well, there's liquid versions and there are soft gel versions. So if you have really gotten behind and you've got lots of inflammation and you have not been taking fish oil regularly, you may actually want to be on a high dose for a while to kind of ramp yourself up and get to that point where you have a lot less inflammation. And so the liquid is going to be an easier way to do that. Now, if at any point when you're taking fish oil and you start to get loose stools, that's usually a sign that you kind of maxed out at that level. So you want to back off a little bit so that the stools have substance again and are not loose, and just stay at that level for a while. And then if you still have indications that you should be taking more, then you can gradually increase from there. So if you need a high dose, a liquid is going to be a way to go. If you just have trouble swallowing capsules, some of the fish oil, they can get really big because they want to pack a lot into it. And if you have any trouble swallowing capsules, then just go with the liquid. It's so much easier. And nowadays they have some really great tasting liquid fish oils out there. But the liquid does oxidize faster than the capsules. The capsules actually help to protect it. So you're going to have a longer shelf life with the lowest amount of oxidation if you're using capsules. And if you are sensitive to the taste, even if it's a good fish taste and you just don't like it, then the capsules are going to be the way to go. And they do often have ones that have some mild lemon flavor to them, which makes them very palatable. Now, if you have infants and toddlers, again, the liquid is going to be the safe way to get that in. And for children, we actually do have children's size fish oil that is tiny so that it's still a capsule that can be swallowed, but it's small enough so that it's safe for a child to swallow. Of course, not anybody that's going to have a choking hazard, so not infants and toddlers, just the liquid for them. Okay. So, and by the way, in our office, one of my favorite fish oils is actually the Wellspring brand. And it is made from Alaskan cod liver oil. It does have 1,000 milligrams in each capsule. It does have the right ratio of EPA to DHA, that natural concentration that we want to see. And it has the healthiness of the vitamin A and the vitamin D that's part of it as well. But I don't know if you remember the old days. Maybe you weren't around then, but you would recognize a picture like this is from like the 30s, 40s, 50s, that era when this is what happened. You went to school and you would take your fish oil, right? You would line right up. And I just want you to notice, like, these kids were not necessarily happy about this ritual that happened on a regular basis. But I want you to notice they were using the same spoon for every child. Step right up, open your mouth, in it goes. They were not concerned about, oh no, spreading germs from one kid to another. Nope, because they were giving them fish oil, which is helping their immune system. It's helping with inflammation in the body. It's actually helping their bodies get healthier. And so they weren't concerned at all. And sometimes it was just like open wide and get it in, like brutal. But there you have it. You had to get it in one way or another. Now, I do want to talk about some other supplements that can help with inflammation. And CBD oil is one of the things, hemp oil is one of the things that many people have been exploring. And I've looked at it myself as well. And I have found a couple of brands that I really like because they perform. They have the quality and they have the standards in their production. But not only that, they have the clinical results. And I have to tell you, in the last, 5 years or so, maybe even a little longer than that, I've had a lot of people coming to me with samples. Maybe they're a new business, they're a new CBD business, and they want me to promote their particular brand. And I take all the samples and I simply test them. And I test them on real patients just to see maybe this is something that would be good for them. And all in all, most of them just tank. They just don't test well. So I'm not sure why that is, but I can tell you that there's a few that test really strongly, and those are the ones that I'm sticking with. So Hygieia is one of those. It's gone through a number of different name changes and branding, but I follow along the process and how it's made because I know that it's really good the way it's made. So this Hygieia CBD I like, and the reasons that I like it are that, and actually it changed its name. It used to be Verum Gold, now it's Hygieia. I like it because it has the highest recorded bioavailability. So it's actually up to 20 times more bioavailable. 90% actually gets absorbed into the bloodstream than the common or conventional CBD or hemp oils. It's number one in stability, so it actually doesn't degrade in the stomach, and that's why it gets into the body because it can pass through the stomach without being degraded. And it also doesn't, it has a long shelf life and it doesn't require refrigeration. It's also the only CBD product in the world that is 100% water soluble. And that means that's one of the reasons why it's optimum for absorption. But how do you think it gets through the stomach if it's 100% water soluble? It's because it actually has this patented structure where it has two encapsulations. And so it has a nanostructure liquid, but it has the encapsulation where it has a double encapsulation. And they actually have done actual scientific testing of this particular product. And so a lot of times when you see scientific studies being referred to in regards to CBD, they're kind of referring to just a generic finding, but not their particular product. Whereas this one actually has scientific evidence testing this product on how effective it is. And all in all, because it's so absorbable, it actually has the lowest effective cost because you actually get so much more value from what you are taking in. Now, another good one that tests strong is the standard process hemp oil complex. And just with this idea of CBD and hemp, it is part of that, the endocannabinoid system. And the endocannabinoid system is found throughout the body with receptors on many, many, many of the cells in the body. And so it actually it helps to regulate everything. It optimizes and balances the immune system, the endocrine system, the nervous system. It actually inactivates the pro-inflammatory cells. And it has this particular version, the standard process hemp oil, it actually has this entourage effect because it's using both the seed and the stalk in it. And they both have different types of benefit. So when you include both in the product, then you're going to get that full effect. And that entourage effect means that it has all these different chemicals in it that all have different impacts on the body. And they use calamari oil along with it. So we know fish oil is really important. Wow, what if you took the calamari oil, the fish oil, and you combined it with the CBD, the hemp oil, in that entourage effect? So you have the full spectrum hemp oil. And then they add a form of broccoli, true brock it's called, and that actually activates the NR2 pathways. Again, the NRF2 pathways, which are important, again, for anti-inflammation and for resolving inflammation. So this is another great product. With both of these, I always do want to test people to make sure that it's the right fit for them. One other product that also is anti-inflammatory, and you've maybe heard of this too, which is curcumin, and that is found in turmeric. Now, if you were to just eat dietary turmeric, like Indian food or curries or that sort of thing, it turns out that dietary turmeric, only 6% of it is actually absorbed through the intestines and actually gets into the blood vessels and into the body. And so this particular form of turmeric, it is infused in fenugreek. And by doing that, it actually makes it 26 times more absorbable than just regular dietary turmeric. So this is one of the most popular products that MediHerb and Standard Process make. And it's because it's so effective. So a lot of people are taking a lot of turmeric and getting limited results. And with this, you'd only need to take I've found about 4 tablets a day is the maximum that most people need. And a lot of people do very well with just 2 per day. But again, I test people to see exactly what they need. But again, if you have either acute inflammation or chronic low-grade inflammation, the turmeric can be a really great tool to be using in our modern world that is so inflammatory. Now, along with this, depending on how the inflammation is showing up, there may be some other tissue-specific supplements that I'm going to couple these broad anti-inflammatory supplements with. And Dr. Royal Lee was the founder of Standard Process, and he actually created an amazing ingredient that's called a protomorphogen. And what it is it acts as the blueprint of healthy tissue for whatever that tissue is. And so if you have, neurodegenerative type of inflammation, then neurotrophin PMG is what I'm going to give to that person, coupled with the other anti-inflammatory protocols. If you have skin inflammation like acne or rashes or eczema or the atopic illnesses like that, then dermatrophin PMG is what I'd give you. If you have cardiovascular inflammation, cardiotrophin PMG. If you've got inflammation of the pancreas, the blood sugar handling piece. If you've got thyroid inflammation. So it just depends on what tissue is experiencing the inflammation, and we're going to couple that with one of the protomorphogens. Now, we talked about how it is really the cumulative effect of our lifestyle that is pushing this chronic low-grade inflammation. And so it's really coming at us in 3 dimensions: thoughts, toxins, and traumas. And many times people think of, when they think of the chemical stress, they think of it as the toxins coming in through food. But even our thoughts are going to have an impact on our cortisol levels. And when our cortisol levels go up, it makes our inflammation go up. And if we have physical traumas, we're going to have that acute injury. But if we don't resolve it properly, then that's going to lead to chronic low-grade inflammation. We also may have low-level physical stress that comes in the form of poor posture, bad habits, and that causes irritation in the body and stress in the body. And that, again, can push inflammation. So when we think of how we eat, how we move, how we think, right? It's our life, it's the cumulative effect of our lifestyles, the foods we're eating, the phones that we're on, the poor posture that we have, the stresses that we have, our own, self-talk, our self-esteem, like all of those things, how we eat, how we move, how we think. Taking fish oil doesn't take the place of the modern lifestyle. It helps to try and mitigate it, and reconcile it. But the most important thing we can do is really think broader. Think of the fish oil as one piece that we're using, but it's not the only one. We have to look at how we're eating, how we're moving, and how we're thinking. And even our posture has an impact on our inflammation levels. I know it's hard to believe, but it truly is. And so when we think of eat, move, and think, we're going to talk about the healthy things to do. But first, I want you to know posture has an impact. Now, this is a study that was from neuroscience research, and it was looking at the very top of the spine, the C1 vertebra has nerve roots that come out, and the neurons that come out of C1, they actually are part of innervating the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve has a big impact on our cortisol levels and our ability to deal with stress, and also our ability to deal with inflammation. And so it shows that the C1 neurons, they're actually involved in the anti-inflammatory response. We need to have a healthy anti-inflammatory response. And so we need to have what's called sympathoexcitation. It's required for anti-inflammatory responses via the C1 neurons. So we actually have to have the right signaling going through our nerve pathways. And so if we look at these nerve pathways, I want to show you at the top of the spine where these nerves go. The nerve right at the top of the spine here, that's this blue one here, it comes out. This is the vagus nerve. Look where it goes. So not only does it go up to involve everything around the head, the structures of the head, but it also comes down and it goes to the heart, the lungs, the stomach, the liver, the pancreas, the adrenals, the small intestine, the large intestine. It goes all the way down to here. So inflammation in any of these tissues can actually be related to dysfunction that's happening at the top of the spine. And one of the number one modern causes of dysfunction at the top of the spine is poor posture. Who would have thought that your posture actually will impact your inflammatory levels? And so that's why we check this area of the spine very closely on anybody that comes in that is struggling with any kind of chronic degenerative type of disease, because we know behind that is chronic low-grade inflammation, and behind that may be that C1 subluxation or nerve interference. And so if you're curious on whether or not you have a C1 subluxation or interference, if you already know you have poor posture, bad habits, please, please, please send us a text and let us connect with you and see if we can help. Now, another dangerous belief, your problems will go away if you ignore them. Oh, just don't bother. Oh, put it off a little bit longer, a little bit longer. Okay. You know as well as I do what happens when you ignore problems. They do not go away. They get more complex, they get harder to correct, they get more expensive, and we start to get limited on what we actually can do and how we can help. So what do we need to do? We need to look at how we're eating, how we're moving, and how we're thinking. So best practices here, just very, very broad strokes here. Eating, we want to look at anti-inflammatory diet, and we want to be supplementing with those anti-inflammatory supplements like the fish oil, the CBD, the turmeric, and so on. Move, what do we mean by that? It turns out that burst exertion exercise helps to turn the stress switch off, lower cortisol levels, and lower inflammation. Now, if you have arthritis and you're trying to move, sometimes that can worsen things. So there are ways, there are techniques that you can use to just do light movement, but to get the same benefits as vigorous exercise. And if you're curious about that, please ask me about the B3 BFR bands, and I can tell you more about that. And if you are watching the recording, just send a text that says that you want to know more about the B3 BFR bands. But otherwise, burst exertion, panting, sweating exercise is the best practice for how to move. And then how to think. Yep, we do want to manage our stress more effectively. I love EFT tapping. Emotional freedom technique tapping is a very fast way to turn the stress switch off, but the research shows that the fastest way to turn the stress switch off is to think of something you're grateful for. Gratitude is the fastest way to turn that stress switch off, and when we do, our cortisol levels go down, which helps to start to bring that inflammation down as well. So really, we need to do a factory reset here because our modern lifestyle is sending us in the wrong direction. So I want you to think about the action steps that you can be taking, and it's going to be very personal and individual for you. What are they? Do you want to go and watch my neck workshop because you've got inflammation in your neck? Or do you want to watch the immune system, bulletproof your immune system workshop, or the how to get 15 pounds healthier in 15 weeks? Is that your action step? Go learn more, dive deep, and help that unpack the ideas. And that's going to motivate you to do what you need to do to take action. Because, everybody knows I need to eat better, think better, move better. But why are we not taking those steps? Sometimes we have to dive deeper and unpack it to really get it like, okay, now I get why I need to do this. And now you've got some momentum behind that incentive of getting it done. Maybe your action step is I just need to do the test so I can see where am I at? And then where do I need to go from here? So if you want to get that Omega Quant test done, then just let us know that. We actually have a special this month on that. And then finally, just taking steps to replace the inflammatory foods with the anti-inflammatory foods. And that's the anti-inflammatory diet. And maybe you also want to get your spine checked to see whether you have any trouble at that vagus nerve level that's just pushing that chronic inflammation in your body. So please reach out to us. You can send us a text. Consult is a way to do that. And again, the number is 802-985-9850. So that is everything I wanted to present to you tonight. I really do want to encourage you to take those action steps. And I hope you've learned a lot from this. If you have any questions, you can, of course, reach out. And I'm going to end our recording and let you be on your way. And anybody that's still on the live call, we're going to answer questions. So thank you so much. Have a great evening.